Amazon founder Jeff Bezos will likely still be the world's richest man after his divorce from his wife Mackenzie is finalized.
Meanwhile, that guy has more money than any human on the planet.
That's right, yeah.
The poor bastard's getting divorced, too. And I think that guy's a conqueror. I think he just wants to take over everything.
Bezos and Sánchez just had the most watched wedding of 2025. And now the internet's buzzing that Lauren is begging Jeff to drop a rumored, sealed $5 billion legal strike.
Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon and one of the world's richest men, has married the former journalist Lauren Sánchez in Venice.
When Jeff Bezos and his wife Mackenzie announced their divorce, they said they made the decision after a trial separation.
We're pulling apart what's confirmed and what's whispered, while unpacking the power math behind an ironclad prenup, a notorious leak saga, and the brand risk stakes that make a number like $5 billion sound believable.
It's a very challenging thing to try and estimate. So I think you just have to try and be reasonable about it, take as much risk off the table as you can for yourself. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Because if this conflict is real, it isn't romance. It's reputation, leverage, and who gets to control the story first.
We mentioned Lauren Sánchez. She posted, she didn't post. She was in the tabloids for this picture of Jeff Bezos smacking her thong-wearing bottom on their yacht. This is, I submit to you, a total setup.
The vows were real. The spectacle was undeniable. Venice watched a billionaire love story glide past basilicas and camera flashes. And for a weekend, it looked like the perfect ending. Designer gowns, candlelit water, a guest list built to break the algorithm. The coverage felt endless. Photos, angles, reposts, breathless captions. And then, almost as fast as the confetti settled, the whispers started.
$37 million divorce.
Billion,
honey. Put some respect on that.
You and your fiance, Jeff Bezos.
Who?
It didn't begin with a headline. It began with a tone. Commentary channels hinting at quiet legal moves. TikToks dissecting body language, security positioning, and who stood where in a balcony shot. Reddit threads trading "I heard from a friend of a friend" like currency. One phrase repeated until it sounded inevitable. A sealed $5 billion hit aimed straight at Lauren. No documents, no docket number, just volume. And online, volume often wins. Why was it so easy to believe? The contrast was surreal. Public romance at opera house scale. Private stakes that feel colder than marble. Viewers remember the old tabloid wars, the leaked messages, the hard lines drawn after that mess. They remember the first divorce's price tag. They picture lawyers in a room with no windows and a timeline on a whiteboard. They imagine a prenup that doesn't bend. So when someone says $5 billion, it doesn't sound like fantasy. It sounds like a move. Meanwhile, the post-wedding glow only made the rumor louder. Every new photo became a Rorschach test. Smiles became strategy. A ring became leverage. A yacht shot wasn't leisure, it was optics. That's the trap of living in public at this scale. The performance never ends, and the audience starts writing scenes you didn't script. By the time outlets finished recapping the ceremony, the narrative had already forked. Fairy tale on one channel, fallout on another. Here's the reality checkpoint as of today. The wedding happened, the media storm happened, the rumor machine is running hot. What hasn't happened in public is a confirmed filing with receipts. That gap between what's dazzling and what's documented is where speculation multiplies. And it's why this particular story keeps pulling focus away from romance and back toward risk. Because this isn't just gossip about a couple, it's an argument about power, who holds it, how it's protected, and what number makes you sit up straight when you hear it. Which brings us to the question everyone's asking. Why did $5 billion stick in people's heads like glue? The answer isn't emotional. It's math, precedent, and pressure. And that's exactly where we're going next. It sticks because it sounds like the right scale. After a breakup that famously transferred tens of billions in stock, audiences assume any new conflict lives in the same weight class. To most people, $5 billion isn't a damages figure. It's a headline number that signals control. It's not about collecting every dollar. It's about planting a flag. This is the size of the risk if you cross a line. There's also the optics math. When a personal brand rides on a global company, every scandal is priced as potential market damage, partnership fallout, and reputational drag. You're not just arguing over assets, you're arguing over belief. Investors, partners, the publics. That's why big number claims feel plausible to viewers even without paperwork. They translate fear into a figure. And then there's negotiation reality. High-stakes disputes don't start at the finish line. Lawyers anchor high to force the other side to do the risk calculus. Legal spend, discovery exposure, PR blowback, time lost. A towering number isn't a prediction, it's pressure. It tells the room, you can fight this, and hate every minute of it. Add confidentiality culture to the mix. With ironclad NDAs and reputation clauses, any alleged breach becomes more than gossip. It becomes an existential switch. Protect the story or lose control of it. In that frame, $5 billion reads less like money and more like a message. It's the size of the warning, not necessarily the settlement. So yes, $5 billion sounds right to the internet because it echoes past scale, matches brand-level stakes, and fits how elite negotiations open. But paper numbers don't exist in a vacuum. They're shaped long before any rumor takes off. And that shaping starts with the document everyone assumes is bulletproof, the prenup. When you've already paid a public, record-breaking price once, you don't walk into round 2 without armor. That's why everyone assumes this marriage sits on top of a document built like a vault. Think precision language. No gray space, nothing left to interpretation in a crisis. At this level, a prenup isn't just about who gets what. It's a control system. Separate property stays separate. Business equity is quarantined. Trusts are walled off. There's often mandatory arbitration, venue selection, and strict confidentiality built into every clause. If a dispute ever sparks, the rules are already chosen, and the room it happens in is already picked. The loudest parts are usually the quietest on paper: non-disparagement, media restrictions, and social media conduct. That means no surprise interviews, no sources close to, no dramatic posts that drag a brand into a storm. Break the rules and there's a cost, sometimes spelled out as liquidated damages, sometimes enforced through injunctive relief that shuts the noise down before it spreads. It sticks because it sounds like the right scale. After a breakup that famously transferred tens of billions in stock, audiences assume any new conflict lives in the same weight class. To most people, $5 billion isn't a damages figure. It's a headline number that signals control. It's not about collecting every dollar, it's about planting a flag. This is the size of the risk if you cross a line. There's also the optics math. When a personal brand rides on a global company, every scandal is priced as potential market damage, partnership fallout, and reputational drag. You're not just arguing over assets, you're arguing over belief. Investors, partners, the publics. That's why big number claims feel plausible to viewers even without paperwork. They translate fear into a figure. And then there's negotiation reality. High-stakes disputes don't start at the finish line. Lawyers anchor high to force the other side to do the risk calculus. Legal spend, discovery exposure, PR blowback, time lost. A towering number isn't a prediction, it's pressure. It tells the room, you can fight this, and hate every minute of it. Add confidentiality culture to the mix. With ironclad NDAs and reputation clauses, any alleged breach becomes more than gossip. It becomes an existential switch. Protect the story or lose control of it. In that frame, $5 billion reads less like money and more like a message. It's the size of the warning, not necessarily the settlement. So yes, $5 billion sounds right to the internet because it echoes past scale, matches brand-level stakes, and fits how elite negotiations open. But paper numbers don't exist in a vacuum. They're shaped long before any rumor takes off. And that shaping starts with the document everyone assumes is bulletproof, the prenup. When you've already paid a public, record-breaking price once, you don't walk into round 2 without armor. That's why everyone assumes this marriage sits on top of a document built like a vault. Think precision language. No gray space, nothing left to interpretation in a crisis. At this level, a prenup isn't just about who gets what. It's a control system. Separate property stays separate. Business equity is quarantined. Trusts are walled off. There's often mandatory arbitration, venue selection, and strict confidentiality built into every clause. If a dispute ever sparks, the rules are already chosen, and the room it happens in is already picked. The loudest parts are usually the quietest on paper: non-disparagement, media restrictions, and social media conduct. That means no surprise interviews, no sources close to, no dramatic posts that drag a brand into a storm. Break the rules and there's a cost, sometimes spelled out as liquidated damages, sometimes enforced through injunctive relief that shuts the noise down before it spreads. So when a number like $5 billion appears in the wild, it snaps to this older map, not because anyone has seen a filing, but because the stakes once proved real enough to force a public counterstrike. The past trained the audience to expect decisive moves, And that expectation fuels the rumor machine now, which leads to the next pressure point, the optics game that never sleeps, where every frame becomes evidence and every silence becomes a story. Every move is a message. In their world, clothing, lighting, and camera angles are strategy. A dress on a balcony at golden hour isn't just a dress, it's an answer to a headline you haven't read yet. A quiet hand on an arm in front of a museum door is reassurance to investors, partners, and a public primed to read the subtext. The couple understands this. They live inside a lens that never blinks. After Venice, the narrative didn't rest. One day, it's couture shots and congratulations. The next, it's yacht photos repackaged as proof of excess, or a jet sighting framed as a values test. The same image can be spun two ways in minutes. Aspirational to one audience, hypocrisy to another. That's the price of total visibility. The moment you feed the machine decides what you meant. So image control becomes its own business line. Not just glam teams and photographers, timing, captions, exclusives, and who gets the first carousel. You shape the frame, then you shape the language that travels with it. Approved images lead. Unapproved angles get buried under better ones. If you can't kill a shot, you dilute it with something cleaner. It's not vanity, it's risk management. Even silence is curated. When rumors flare, you can speak, or you can flood the feed with neutral wins. Philanthropy updates, space milestones, mentoring clips, family moments that feel steady. The tactic is simple. Create so many harmless frames that controversy loses oxygen. Viewers call it distraction. Strategists call it narrative weighting. Either way, it works more often than it fails. Lauren plays a unique role in this. She understands broadcast rhythm and how to hold a shot. She knows when to be the focal point and when to step out of frame so the brand breathes. That duality, glamour and restraint, keeps her camera ready while signaling discipline to the people who matter behind the scenes. The strength and spark mix is the point. It invites fascination. It also invites scrutiny. And scrutiny is relentless. A smile becomes strategy. A ring flash becomes leverage. A friendly dinner becomes alignment. The public keeps searching for the hidden clause behind the pose. That's why a giant number like $5 billion refuses to leave the conversation. It's a plot device people can hang on any photo. It turns a sunset image into a chessboard. From a crisis standpoint, this is where both sides sharpen their tools. One playbook focuses on receipts and restraint. Document, don't dramatize. The other leans on warmth and access. Be relatable, pick the right interview, reclaim the narrative with presence. Neither is about feelings. Both are about control, which raises the real question that rumor chasers keep asking. If a sealed legal strike actually existed, how would it function in a world this public? What would it target? What would it protect? To answer that, we have to step into the hypothetical and map the mechanics. Because that's where the numbers start to make sense. Think leverage, not loot. In ultra-high net worth disputes, the first objective isn't a check, it's control. A sealed action, if it existed, would be designed to freeze behavior fast, stop interviews, halt leaks, and lock down any materials that could damage brand value. Money is the headline number. The real prize is an injunction. The bones of a case like that would be contractual, not romantic. You'd expect claims rooted in breach of confidentiality, non-disparagement, and violations of NDA/prenup clauses. If lawyers wanted extra bite, they might layer in tortious interference or trade secret/confidential business info misuse. Not because this is a corporate spat, but because reputational spillover touches actual enterprises. Remedies would read like switches: temporary restraining orders, preliminary injunctions, specific performance, liquidated damages if a clause pre-prices harm, and tight protective orders that muzzle discovery from ever seeing daylight. Why sealed? Privacy isn't the only reason. Sealing minimizes market impact, protects third-party names, and keeps discovery from turning into a public museum of receipts. Even sealed, there are tells: rapid-fire hearing calendars, attorney substitutions by heavyweight firms, and sterile docket entries that appear with minimal detail. Some venues still leave a breadcrumb, a case number with redactions, placeholders like DOE, or orders that reference sealed exhibits without describing them. The $5 billion headline, would function as an anchor. High figures pressure the other side to do the math. Risk of discovery, PR damage, legal spend, and the cost of time. Anchors aren't predictions, they're bargaining positions that set the altitude of the room. In parallel, the real machinery would be injunctive. Orders compelling the return or destruction of data, device imaging under a neutral expert, restrictions on interviews, and swift contempt consequences for violations. The message is simple: talk and pay, or stop and walk. Discovery, if it ever opened, would be clinical, metadata, cloud backups, message archives, third-party subpoenas, and custodian lists that map who saw what and when. That prospect alone moves negotiations. Nobody at this level wants their day-to-day communication style introduced into evidence, even with redactions. Which is why the most common ending to a case like this, if it were real, isn't a dramatic verdict. It's a quiet stipulation with reaffirmed confidentiality and a timetable that resets everyone's behavior. Timeline-wise, the play would be fast. Emergency relief, days, preliminary injunction, weeks, discovery brinkmanship, months, and then a settlement window before anything explosive risks becoming permanent record. Throughout, both sides would run parallel media strategies, one prioritizing documentation and silence, the other aiming to humanize and reclaim the frame without tripping a clause. And that's the bridge to the next beat. If the legal tool is leverage, the public narrative is the battlefield. One side wins by proving it doesn't need the spotlight. The other wins by using it without bleeding. So how do they actually fight that information war in real time? That's where the crisis playbooks come out. In fights this expensive, one side builds evidence, the other builds empathy. The quiet strategy is simple. Document everything, timestamp it, and speak last. That means short corridors, fewer phones, tighter access, and a chain of custody mindset around any sensitive material. If a statement comes at all, it's late, lean, and backed by receipts rather than adjectives. The goal isn't applause, it's authority. You don't argue with rumors, you undercut them with artifacts. The opposite strategy runs on warmth and timing. Humanize, don't litigate. Pick one trusted interviewer, control the set, and keep the message on values: loyalty, resilience, purpose. A single photo series can reframe a week of headlines. A carefully placed profile can soften a narrative without ever naming the rumor. This isn't manipulation so much as mood. Use presence to remind the audience there's a person behind the plot. Both camps operate with the same triangle: legal, comms, security. Legal writes the rules of engagement. Comms scripts oxygen, what to starve, what to feed, what to flood. Security handles hard edges, device audits, travel choreography, and who sits in what room. If a sealed action were even on the table, the tells wouldn't come from speeches. They'd leak out as logistics. Sudden attorney rotations, a new lead firm with heavyweight reputations, calendars that go blank, assistants swapped, and the phrase, "no comment on ongoing matters," repeated until it stops sounding defensive. Message discipline is its own weapon. One side will pre-bunk, quietly giving context to a few credible reporters so nonsense dies before it spreads. The other will soft deny, leaning on language like inaccurate characterizations rather than platforming the claim directly. Expect strategic ambiguity, sentences that say just enough to reassure allies while revealing nothing to adversaries. On social, watch for a feed shift. Fewer candid moments, more archival images and philanthropic highlights. That's not vanity, that's narrative ballast. Receipts versus relatability is the core clash. Documentation wins in court, charm wins in culture. But each carries risk. Release too much too soon, and you feed discovery in the court of public opinion. Lean too hard on likability, and critics call it spin. The tightrope walks over a single drop: credibility. Whoever looks more in control of their tone, measured, not manic, steals the middle. So what should you watch if you're trying to separate theater from truth? Look for synchronized moves, a friendly feature running the same week a new law firm appears on background. A sudden family-first post right after a quiet hearing date pops up on a docket with redactions. Sponsors and partners going unusually quiet. Titles changing on bios. These are the breadcrumbs professionals follow when there's nothing official to read. And that loops us back to the only question that matters right now. what's verified, what's rumor, and what real-world signals actually mean something. To finish this story, we're going to separate the Venice photos from the Whisper campaign and map the specific tells that would confirm a fight this big. Next, here's the split screen. Confirmed, the Venice ceremony happened, the coverage was massive, and the couple operates with the kind of legal and media infrastructure you'd expect at this level. Also likely, a detailed prenup with strict confidentiality and reputational safeguards. None of that is controversial. It's the scaffolding of their life. Unconfirmed. Any actual $5 billion action against Lauren. No public filing, no case number floating around, no named counsel going on record. What exists right now is a viral storyline with just enough history behind it to feel possible, and just enough mystery to keep spreading. That gap between spectacle and documentation is where rumor thrives. So how would reality announce itself? Not with a dramatic post, with paperwork and patterns. Watch for heavyweight law firms suddenly appearing as counsel of record. Look for docket entries with heavy redactions or placeholder party names, especially in venues that handle complex disputes. Pay attention to synchronized shifts. PR no comments, calendars going blank, assistants rotated, travel tightened, and feeds that pivot from glamour to legacy projects overnight. Those moves don't prove a case, but they raise the floor on seriousness. There are quieter tells too, reconfirmations of NDAs, polite letters that remind someone of their obligations, requests for device imaging handled by a neutral expert, changes to how photos are sourced, captioned, and approved, tiny operational edits that hint at a new rulebook in play. That's how pressure looks up close. Tidy, technical, unavoidable. Until something official surfaces, the only responsible position is simple: separate what you can see from what you're being told to feel. The wedding is fact. The guardrails are logical. The $5 billion number is narrative until documents say otherwise. If reality lands, it won't arrive as a leak. It will arrive as a timeline, a venue, and a judge's name. And that brings us to the finish. Strip away the noise, and this story isn't about romance or rumor. It's about control, reputation, and the cost of losing either. So what does all of this add up to right now? Let's tie it together.